Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at a pair of results that I thought were very impressive and very important, and we'll be focusing on two states in particular. I'll be explaining why these results from the 2024 election matter, and more specifically, why I think they happened. So again, without further ado, let's cut the suspense here. We'll be talking about Nevada and Arizona. These are two states that Joe Biden won in 2020. Hillary Clinton won one of these states in 2016, even though she lost the election. But in 2024, for the first time of his three runs, Donald Trump carried both these states. And as you can see, they weren't particularly close. They were obviously contested, but at the end of the day, Trump won Nevada by almost 4% and Arizona by almost 6%. It was a very, very good night for him in these two states, and these were his two best swing states. They were, redder than North Carolina. They were certainly better than the Rust Belt and redder than Georgia as well. And so these were, I would say, states where I think Trump did the best when you compare them to, or compare his performance to what he was expected to do. So let's start with Arizona. Let's talk about what happened here, because again, Donald Trump won Arizona by almost 200,000 votes. This was really not close. And again, if you watch my final prediction, I did have Trump winning Arizona, but I thought it was going to be within 2%. I thought it was going to be about a 2-point margin, not 5.5, 6%. What we saw was that every county in the state shifted towards Donald Trump pretty significantly. But really, you can divide this into three categories. Let's say you have a rural turnout surge. You had a collapse for Kamala Harris among counties or in counties along the border, and then where Democrats thought they'd maybe get saved was in Maricopa County, which had been trending left for almost a decade now, but Donald Trump held his own there, and he won it back from 2020. So let's talk about this. Again, I think the easiest thing to point to here is the rural turnout. We saw, obviously, compared to 2020, Donald Trump did very well in these rural areas in 2020 as well, but he did even better in 2024, right? Mojave County, just as an example, he got 78% in 2024. That's up from 75% in 2020. You'll also notice that he got 8,000 more votes in this county, he got 78,000 in 2020. He got 85. Yeah, so he got around 8,000 more votes here than he did in 2020. Harris got, as you can see, around the same amount as Joe Biden did, around 1,000 less. And so we saw turnout was up in these rural counties, and Trump's margin as a result expanded. And this wasn't specific to, say, Mojave. You go to other parts of the state, right, like Yavapai, La Paz. These are both counties where in La Paz, in La Paz in 2020, Trump got 69. He got 64 in Yavapai. He got 72 in La Paz in 2024 and 66 in Yavapai. And so, again, Arizona is a state that actually isn't too rural. I know that you have a lot of big counties in the northern part of the state, like Mojave, like Yavapai, like, I'd say to an extent La Paz, that do grant pretty substantial vote sinks to Republicans, right? But Arizona is not a rural state. The votes here come in the suburbs. I said this statistic many times before the election, and I will say it again. Maricopa County casts around 60% of the votes in any given Arizona statewide election. Maybe a little more in midterms, a little less in presidential elections, but I would say you can bet your bottom dollar that in 2024 it was at minimum 58 or 59%. It was probably close to 60 or 61 or 62% of the total votes cast. It was somewhere in that range, and ultimately, had Donald Trump lost Maricopa County by as much as Kerry Lake did in that Senate race, this would have been significantly closer. Again, I don't think it would have been enough to save Kamala Harris because Ruben Gallego netted around 100,000 votes in Maricopa, but it would have been, it would have brought her close because, again, Kamala Harris lost Maricopa by 70,000, Ruben Gallego won it by 100,000. If you give an 170,000 vote shift here, I think Trump would win, but very narrowly by 0.2, 0.3, 0.4%, just off of my estimate, maybe a little more. But again, just that goes to show that Harris, if she had just overperformed in Maricopa, she would have been saved potentially. But before we go to Maricopa, really, let's talk about the border, because the border was, I think, the biggest raw, percentage problem for Kamala Harris in Arizona. Now, I think my favorite example of this is Yuma County, which in 2016, Hillary Clinton only lost by around 2%. This was a very close county, and actually, before 2020, many Democrats hoped to flip it. And they obviously go back, just think back to 2016, 2017, 2018. Democrats, this was really the early stages of the Democratic collapse among the Hispanic electorate within this country, right? In 2016, Hillary Clinton did it really well with Hispanic voters across the country. Obviously, she was able to run it up with Hispanic voters in blue states like New York, Florida, or New York, Illinois, California, in swing states like Florida and Arizona, and even in deep reds or even red leaning states or deep red states like Texas, for example, Hillary Clinton did well. Now, what's notable about Yuma County is that it is a mix of very urban as well as rural. There's not a ton of suburbs here. This part of the county is where the city of Yuma is, which obviously isn't a big city, but is a pretty dense urban center. And then you have the more rural part of the county, as you can see out here. It is geographically a large county. You have a lot of rural precincts here. And so that made it especially vulnerable for Democrats because there was no suburban territory to kind of counteract what we've been seeing, where rural areas have moved right a little bit and urban areas have moved right by a lot. And so ultimately what's happened is that this county has gone from a county that 8 years ago Hillary Clinton was only down by a couple hundred votes into a county that netted Donald Trump over or nearly 14,000 votes. So certainly Democrats have fallen a lot here. They have more room to fall. Again, Biden lost this county by, I think, 8% in 2020. And this was the only county that I think Blake Masters and Kari Lake did better than Trump in 2022. And the shift continued again. And, look at how Kari Lake did. She did a lot worse than Trump, but she I think, even still outperformed Trump in 2020 here. So, again, prime example. But if we look at a pretty crazy shift, let's talk about the 2020 election in Arizona, where we saw a already pretty big shift in Santa Cruz County. It was a 12-point shift towards Donald Trump. He lost it by 36 in 2020, so that means he lost it by roughly 48 in 2016. If we check up on it in 2024, he only lost it by 19, so it went from 48 to 36 to 19. So the margin cut in half, essentially. Now, this is a small county, but it goes to show the broader trend at play here, which is that Kamala Harris and the Democrats really, really dropped the ball with Hispanic voters this year. And obviously, we can see that in the Senate that Kari Lake did worse than Trump. Trump lost it by 19. Kari Lake obviously lost it by almost 30. So we saw a pretty significant ticket split there. But again, even this 29-point loss for Kari Lake is way better than what Trump did in 2020. So again, keep that in mind when you think about these counties in the border in Arizona. A lot of Democrats doubted the resonance of the border issue. I think to an extent it might have. I think immigration as a whole played a huge role in this election, obviously. But I think in no state were Democrats punished more for it than Arizona, arguably. So that's something to keep in mind. But let's talk of Maricopa. As I said, you saw me do the math in real time a few minutes ago. If Kamala Harris had gotten what Ruben Gallego got out of Maricopa, she would have almost won. She would have almost pulled it off, despite the massive shifts against her in Yuma, in Santa Cruz, and in the southern part of the state, despite massive turnout increases that favor Donald Trump in these rural areas. That's why Arizona, that's why I still think it's be a swing state going forward. I think this is a silver line for Democrats, is that if you do what Ruben Gallego did here, you can outperform, you can overcome pretty bad results everywhere else. Right. So Maricopa County, but this is I think arguably the worst result for Harris, not in terms of long-term disaster for Democrats, but just in terms of how I think bad it was just for her as a candidate. We saw she lost Maricopa County by 70,000 votes. This was a county that in 2020 netted Joe Biden. He didn't win it by a lot, but it still netted him 45,000 votes. So we saw a shift of well over 100,000 votes. And we actually kind of saw the vote totals reverse. Turnout here was, as you can see, Trump got 1.05 million. Kamala Harris got 20,000 less than 1 million. So we saw was that Harris got around 15,000 less than Donald Trump in 2020 when he lost the county. So again, Trump got 995K, Harris got 980K. And then the Trump number was pretty similar to the Biden number from 2020. Biden got 1.04 million, Trump got 1.05 million. So turnout was roughly the same. So Democrats I don't think Democrats really can blame it on a turnout decrease the way they can in other counties, right? It's just that we saw there were a certain number of people who voted for Biden in 2020 who I think voted for Trump in 2024. Truly a very bad performance for Harris, because again, this was her campaign. It was supposed to win over moderate voters, even conservative voters who didn't like Trump, who were sick of the Trump era, as polls showed that some Americans were like there was a case to be made prior to the election that it was the right approach to run against Trump in the sense that Harris would say, look, it's the same playbook, we're done with this, right? Like the whole we're not going back thing, which I think that slogan was always not necessarily the best, but I will admit that I thought that the running on ending the Trump era, I think, as if you go back to watch my videos before the election, I did think that there was some merit to that strategy. I didn't like the "we're not going back" slogan, but I did think the strategy as a whole was certainly, defensible. Right? It was supposed to appeal to these voters, and they voted for Trump at the end of the day. It wasn't successful, and so that to me is a pretty clear rejection of what Democrats thought they were running on in this election. It's Maricopa County. That's what it was. They were supposed to win this. It was supposed to make up for, the losses in the rural areas, the losses in these majority Hispanic counties, or these counties with, sizable Hispanic populations, or counties in the border. It did not. And we saw as a consequence of the losses the Democrats had in these areas, we saw Harris fall in Maricopa County. But let's talk about Nevada, because Nevada is a smaller state. It's a bit easier to analyze than Arizona. I like Arizona. I think it's fun to look at, but there are certainly multiple variables at play. In Nevada, I can tell you one thing, and that's all you have to know. It's Clark County. This county in 2016, if we go back to the 2016 election here, Biden in 2020 won this county by around 9.4%. Hillary Clinton won it by almost 11%. 2024, Kamala Harris won it by 2. A little over. She won it by around 2.5, rounded up. And this is a county that casts around 3/4 of the vote in Nevada. It's even bigger in Nevada than Maricopa is in Arizona. It's really what happens in Clark dominates the rest of the state. This is the ultimate land does not vote state, because you look at all this red. Obviously it matters to an extent because it nets Trump some votes, gives him some breathing room. But if Harris had just held her own in Clark, if she'd done as Biden did, she would have narrowly held on to Nevada. And Biden, by the way, didn't even do that well. In 2020, this was a bad performance for him. But Harris did 7% worse. So let's look at the turnout. In a pandemic year where Democrats famously did not run a robust door-knocking operation, where they didn't mobilize their voters to the extent that many argued they should have. If we look at what happened here in 2020, Clark County, Biden got 521,000 votes. Kamala Harris got 520,000 votes. So in a year where Democrats went all in on, this year was Democrats the bigger ground game. They went all in on mobilizing their voters, getting their organizations, whether it was unions or progressive alliances, out to door knock, to mobilize voters, to get out the vote on election day, or even to bank those early votes in. At the end of the day, they got even fewer votes than they did in 2020 in this county. In the midst of COVID, it was close, but they're going to get around 1,000 fewer. Donald Trump, on the other hand, he's going to get, when it's all said and done, or he did get, it's been done, 63,000 votes more than 2020. And so that didn't win him Clark County, but that certainly won him Nevada. Because again, if you go back to 2020 and you pull up the margin in the state, as you can see on your screen right here, Trump lost this state. It was close. People forget about this. It was close. Trump lost the state by 34,000 votes. He gained 63,000 votes in Clark County alone. And then, I'd say the cherry on top, the frosting was that in Washoe County, he gained a couple thousand votes from 2020. He lost it by a bit less than he did in 2024. He gained a few votes from 2020. Then he held his ground in the rural areas fairly well. But again, that's what it was in Clark County. That's all that mattered. Kamala Harris, 7% worse, netted. She had a 1,000 vote decrease, while Trump had a 60,000 vote increase. That's the ball game in a state that's decided by 30, 40,000 votes in most elections. And Donald Trump ultimately, he won it. It wasn't by a lot, but it was more than 2020 for Biden. So it wasn't decisive, but I'd say it was a pretty clear victory. He definitely crossed 50% of the vote here. So that, to me, those are his two best swing states, and it came in Arizona because of a number of factors. It came because of the border collapse for Democrats. It came because in these rural counties we saw that the Republicans turned out, while Democrats, to an extent, stayed home, really, because we saw the turnout increases for Trump, while the Harris number stayed about the same. And then we saw in Maricopa County, it was not enough to save Harris. At the end of the day, Democrats needed this to come in huge for them, kind of like it did in the Senate race. It did not. That is what happened in Arizona. And again, go back to Nevada. What matters is Clark County, 7% worse. That will do it. So again, I'll be talking about more of these states going forward. I want to talk about Georgia, North Carolina next, because I think these are kind of the reverse, where Trump, did well here. He won them, but I think Democrats have room to build. But in Nevada and Arizona, for today's video, this was a bad result, and Democrats really are going to have to change some things up before 2026 to win back these states. They have a governor's race in Arizona, as well as in Nevada. There is an incumbent Republican governor in Nevada. I think Joe Lombardo, pretty popular, sitting pretty at this point. And in Arizona, Democrats have an incumbent governor, Katie Hobbs, who I think is now very nervous about her chances. So again, subscribe to the channel. We're going to talk about it in the next few years, and we're going to see where we go. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.